And yes, you are. You are locked in, loaded, and ready for launch on the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB, streaming on Rumble, streaming on X, streaming on YouTube, streaming on that social media network that begins with a F, but we don't like talking about it. And we are streaming at the mothership, WYAB.com. We are going to equip the saints today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really excited because in the second hour, we get to use this platform here at 103.9 WYAB to give a voice to Joe Pye Thomas, J6er, getting his story out there. Look, President Trump may have already pardoned 98% of the J6ers out there. I think there's still one in jail, and a few got not pardons, but commuted sentences for time served. So, but those stories are out there and they need to be told. And if we don't tell those stories, if we don't get those stories out there, then they're eventually going to be forgotten. And we're only 6 months past these sentences being pardoned and commuted. So, in the second hour, that's what we're going to talk about. In the meantime, we're going to equip the saints. And it's incredible. The opportunity cost of things out there, it's fleeting. You get this opportunity, and the cost might be you driving 45 minutes to produce a radio show. The cost might be you driving 15 minutes to babysit your neighbor because they got to run to the hospital to see their other kid who's in the hospital. You don't know what's going to happen, but these opportunities are going to pop open in front of you. And I just want to encourage you today that if you have some type of opportunity that maybe you weren't planning on or you weren't expecting, um, man, you need to walk right through that. And we're going to talk about that. Look, if you want to be on the show today, the number is 601-879-0002. The texting line is open. It's already off and running. 601-879-5060. Chris Arnold, I see you, man. It's going to be a great show. Hope you enjoy it. And this is all about my favorite verse in the Bible. Gentle answers turn away wrath, harsh words incite. There's only really been one story. It sucked the life out of everything, and people are still talking about it. But I'm starting to see a shift, and it's interesting because what I thought, especially those first 3 days, I'll be truthful with you. I'm like, man, this is going to be tough. But the data is starting to come back, ladies and gentlemen. The data is starting to come back. And as you know, I use Rasmussen reports. I believe in it, and I want to stay consistent with y'all. So if I say President Trump approval ratings up, this is where I'm getting it from. If the president approval ratings down, this is where I'm getting it from. I am on X. It's just at Andrew Gosser, at AndrewGasser. If you would give me a follow on X, you can just see the Rasmussen's report that I just posted. And I want to read this to you. So when this all kicked off, basically on July 7th, because the last day before was July 3rd, July 4th was obviously a holiday. The 5th and 6th were the weekend. President Trump was at -5 approval index with 35% strongly approving, 40% strongly disapproving. Total approved was 50%. Total disapproved was 48%. And that's the baseline. This was before all this Epstein nonsense just completely blew up. In the following days, it went to -6, -7, -9, -10. Then something happened on the 16th, 2 days ago. It dropped to -9. No big deal. Now it's dropped to -7 yesterday, and today it's at -5. But here's the crazy thing. Total approve during the whole thing is right back where it started at 50%. A lot of people don't believe me on this, but I have to share the information with you as I get it. I want you all to trust me, but I want you to verify what I'm saying. That's how we grow and build the business or build the business and the radio show is by making sure that the data we put out there for people like, here's the deal, John. I know you're listening. That's just what it is. Republicans and President Trump are right back before this whole Epstein nonsense kicked off. But there's been some changes. And it's really fascinating to watch how a week ago Democrats didn't want anything to do with the Epstein file, but now they're calling for the file's release. And it's going to happen. It's going to start slowly, but it's going to happen to where they're going to come out with the grand jury. And by the way, just so you know, the grand jury testimony from 2006, here's the deal, John, which you said didn't happen until in the 20 teens when you were talking on the radio yesterday and said you needed a platform. So I'm giving you one if you want it. But Governor Ron DeSantis already released all that information. He's already ahead of the game. So when Pam Bondi comes in and then approves what the state of Florida already released in their case, it's just going to be a double win. But you know something special when CNN, which is absolutely falling apart with the lowest total viewership, they're second in the demo, but it's really so inconsequential in the demographic that it doesn't matter. But there are a couple people on there that I do casually keep track of just because they are entertaining, number one, and that's what we have to do. So we have to make sure that we provide information in an entertaining manner, but we also have to make sure it's factual. And this is really worth listening to. So here we go. Here's that sound.
Look, I think this one surprised me a bit because of all these complaints online going after Trump and the Epstein files. You might think his approval ratings were going down, Republicans. They're going up, Republicans.
I'm going to start that over again. The sound was really low, and I want to make sure I get that right.
Look, I think this one surprised me a bit because of all these complaints online going after Trump and the Epstein files. You might think his approval ratings were going down, Republicans. If anything, they're going up. Republicans who approve of Trump. Look at our CNN poll. The prior one, 86%. The one out this week, 88% were Republicans. How about Quinnipiac? The prior poll, 87% approve of Republicans. This week out, 90% were Republicans. If anything, Donald Trump's approval rating has gone up since this whole Epstein saga started. He is at the apex or close there too in terms of his popularity with Republican voters, Epstein files, complaints or not.
And that is what we call a wrap. You know, when you have the leftist liberals saying that his popularity is going up, and you know, I sat there and I talked to my friends, and we talk about it, and there's a lot of us who are really still fired up about the whole Epstein thing, and as we should be. We want to protect our kids, but at the same time, we've had so much winning to talk about, and it just keeps on piling up. And I think there's that the mainstream Republican Party, along with mainstream America, is like, look, this is definitely something that we're going to have to re-examine. And to President Trump's credit, I think he is pivoting to that in a way that makes sense to him. But we're moving forward. Look, we're doing all sorts of great stuff. People don't realize this, but just announced 750 tons of munitions from Iran being sent to the Houthis in Yemen, intercepted. 750 tons. That is a lot of weapons. And of course, that's not hit the mainstream media yet, but it's out there. It's going to be reported on. And that's just one of the many ways we've been winning. We're talking about the economic data. Remember how that interest rate went up by 0.1% and everybody was gloom and doom? Well, the very next day, the reports come out and say that the economy is booming along better than ever. And while that 1/10 of 1 percentage point did go up, there was so much other good economic data that it got washed out. It wasn't as bad. But I want to continue with this CNN report because this is the real story. And then we got to talk about Mississippi today because this ties right in. And that's what we do here on the Andrew Gosser Show. We tie stuff together, put a nice little bow on it so we can easily understand it and let people know, like, here's the deal, John, what's really going on.
You just proved that not everything online is real in real life.
Who knew?
Amazing.
Twitter and X are not reality.
Is there any reason that you can find that this hasn't taken hold and hurt him?
Yeah. I mean, on X, all you hear about is the Epstein files. But how about out in the real public? Republicans who said the top issue was Epstein case. The answer is one, and not 1%, One respondent. This is a great little finding that Ariel Edwards-Levy, who of course is part of our polling unit, found. Just one single Republican said that the nation's top problem is in fact the Epstein case. Not much of a surprise that therefore Donald Trump's approval rating has not suffered with Republicans because of the Epstein case, because the bottom line is most Americans say it's not high up on their priority.
And that's just where it's at. The big thing is even CNN is saying, what's happening on Facebook, what's happening on Instagram or X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. That is the simulation. It's almost like the AI. The algorithm looks at what's hot, and all of a sudden it gets shoved down your throat, crammed down your throat, and that's all you see. And if that's all you see, that must be what's happening. That must be what's real. For those of you who know, chicken or beef, pick one, chicken or beef, go, 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 pick. I don't want to get myself in too much trouble there, but if you know, you know. And we just start getting all this crazy information driven down our throats. And in a way, I think it's good. It's important that we are able to access stuff that we need to see that we deem important. But we also have to be able to balance that with reality. Or as my daughter likes to tell me in a loving way, Dad, sometimes people just need to go out there and touch some grass. And we got that big tropical storm coming, so touch that grass while it's still nice outside, because it's going to be a little bit wet and rainy later on. And Andy, how does this social media comment by CNN tie into Mississippi? Well, I'll tell you, broken clock is right twice a day. And Mississippi Today has got a great story about how Mississippi can start using its law on social media age verification, court says. So now our teenagers are going to have to verify their age. And I'm not sure how the whole system works yet. So I can't go into details on that. But I think this is a great thing, because we don't need our 10 and 11-year-olds doom scrolling through Instagram and X. There's a lot of stuff out there that 11 and 12-year-old doesn't need to see or be subjected to. I'll tell you that on Facebook, that platform that begins with a F that I don't like talking about, there's a lot of things that a 53-year-old man doesn't need or want to see, or doesn't even search out, but yet gets pushed down my feed. It's ridiculous. And as the algorithm grows and as this AI generation continues to push data and stories our way, it's going to continue to be a problem. How are we going to solve it? I don't know. We're building 3 data centers in Mississippi. We've got the power to do it. There's a lot of things coming our way that we're going to have to take on, and we're going to have to do that. And like I told everybody yesterday, the best way to combat this is watch what your kids doom scroll, watch what they're watching on social media, watch what they're putting into their brains. We got another story coming up, and if it's not the next segment, it's a segment after, but it's everybody's favorite environmental hero, Captain Planet. We'll get to that, but yep, Mississippi's age verification law is going into effect. And the reason is, like, Andy, that's our First Amendment right. We got to make sure that we take care of it. Well, remember, this was all enacted because of a sextortion scheme on Instagram that led a 16 Mississippi boy to take his own life. That's why we have these things. And the internet is great. We can use it for so much good. You've got so much intelligence at your fingertips, whether you use Grok, ChatGPT, or another AI agent. All that information is there for us to use, but it can also be twisted and turned in a negative way so quickly. I'm grateful for everybody who's tuning in today. We've got a great show. We've got Joe Thomas coming up in the second hour. If you haven't yet, please like and share the stream. Let people know that we're on the air. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. Oh, yeah. It's the dulcet tones at the Andrew Gosser Show, 103.9 WYAB. Look, Brother Clay, he's going to be out there today at today through Sunday at the 38th annual Mississippi Wildlife Extravaganza over in Pearl, Mississippi, Clive Youth Center on campus of Hinds County Community College. Look, go out there. I think he's out there today starting at 12 o'clock. Go out there and join him. You know, Mississippi's got so much great stuff going on, and today's going to be a good day to get out there to go outside and have a good time with the family. So head on out there, join Clay. That's something awesome to do. Look, we're talking about all this great stuff that's happening on here. And I've got my stack of stuff always ready to go. And the next thing we got to talk about is the Democrats. Because the Democrats, they have no solutions. Let's really think about that. What solutions have they put forward that have been meaningful in any way, shape, matter, form, nature, or relationship? They haven't. But do you know what they do have? They do have talking points. We put on Senator Schumer yesterday talking about the flooding in Texas and him trying to make a stand for PBS and NPR, saying that people died because of those organizations going away. They weren't even gone away at the time that the flood happened. That doesn't matter. No solutions, just talking points. And here's the great thing about this is that America agrees. If you look up Democrat approval rating in your search engine du jour, you will see that whether it's Fox News, Democrats hit rock bottom as party plummets to all-time low, poll says. Rolling Stone, you know, that mecca of right-wing theology and thinking, congressional Democrats' approval hits record low. Or you could go to some place like the New York Post, which originally got banned for leading with the Hunter Biden laptop story. And remember, Twitter kicked them off, and then Facebook kicked them off, and then Google shut them down. And basically, the New York Post was the only newspaper out there, the nation's oldest newspaper, by the way. They came out with this headline: job approval for congressional Democrat hits an all-time low, flat out terrible. And it's bad. No one believes what the Democrats are selling, not even their own party. And if we think about this, you know, this was absolutely the best time to start attacking what I'm just going to start calling the Epstein problem or the Epstein issue. I'm debating between the two, but it's one of them. And we got to make sure that we stay on top of this Democrat issue, because they are not going to provide anything for us. This is a Quinnipiac poll, so I don't necessarily like Quinnipiac too much. They're definitely very leftist, but it says only 19% of registered voters approve of the way Democrats in Congress are handling their job. The Quinnipiac poll says it's a dismal rating, and the language that they use describing where the Democrat Party is. And here's the deal, John. It's a great day to be a Democrat, right? Maybe you can enlighten us and help us out with this. But it's so bad that even Democrats are shying away from their party. It's difficult. It's tough. Even among Democrat voters, a majority, 52% of Democrat voters, 52% disapprove of the way Democrat leadership in the House and the Senate is performing. You've got the minority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, and that guy in the House, Hakeem Jeffries. They ain't doing the party any favors. Hakeem Jeffries' filibuster actually made it easier for some of those on-the-fence Republicans to vote for the big, beautiful bill because of his filibuster. Thank you for that, Mr. Jeffries. Republicans, we appreciate that. Overall, 1/3 of voters approve of the way that the Republicans are handling the job, while 62% disapprove. So see, here's the deal, John. I don't hide the data that doesn't look good for Republicans. What this tells me is that as bad as the Democrats are, the Republicans need a little bit more move to the right and be a little bit more aggressive in these Doge cuts that Elon Musk has put forward with his team. Shout out Big Balls. Good job. We want to make sure that those cuts get enacted. And the faster we can do that, the better off we're going to be. So only 33% of Americans approve the way Republicans are handling Congress. And 70 among Republican voters, though, 77 approve of how the Republicans in the House and Senate are doing. So you got 33% of America, which is the hardcore Republicans and a few middle of the roaders. But among the party base, you got 77% approval. So that's looking pretty good. And we need to address something that was brought to my attention. And I thought I addressed this on the radio program last week, or maybe it was earlier this week, but it needs to be addressed again. Unknown texter, why is it that they have to have all these votes to get these meaningless cuts passed? $9 billion is paltry compared to everything that Elon Musk and Doge found. I concur. But here's the thing. The Republicans, I almost said, here's the deal. But here's how this works. Because of how they passed the budget, they don't have to get a quorum in the Senate to vote on it. If we did this the way that it used to be done before hyperpartisanship took over the United States Senate, we would be able to get much more of this done. But how it is now is they're using something called conference, and a simple majority. So this budget goes up, and it's a simple up or down vote. That's why Vice President J.D. Vance is so critical in all of this. We've got those 3 Republican senators, Suzanne Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, who are voting with the Democrats. So that's basically killing everything in the Senate. There's no way to get it out of the Senate back to the House to vote. And that's why President J.D. Vance, on time, on target, he's doing a great job. You've got to admit, for a vice president, compared to the last 3, 4 vice presidents that we've had, even 5. So you go back, you have Miss Kamala, who was a vice president. Before that, you had, oh my goodness, I just had his name on the tip of my tongue. Trump's vice president from Indiana, Mike Pence. He wasn't anything to write home about. Joe Biden wasn't anything to write home about. And before Joe Biden was Dick Cheney. My goodness. And before that, it was Al Gore. So our vice president talent pool has been rather low or shallow, shall we say. And J.D. Vance is a younger guy. He's articulate. And even my Democrat friends tell me that when he gives that look, and you know what look I'm talking about, when either a moderator or a newscaster is trying to blow smoke up his behind, and he gives you that look where he just kind of smiles, turns his head to the side, and says, we're all smiling because we know it's happening. So we're doing good as a Republican Party. There is lots of room to grow. I do think we need to embrace our conservative values more, but we don't need to have it in a way where we're clanging people over the head with it. We have to be able to explain it. Gentle answers. Why do you think the way you do? Why does life begin at conception? All these questions that many middle of the road people have, and many of those people who lean left but are still considered in that middle, that moderate section, we need to reach out to them, because right now, clearly, this article from the New York Post says that there is a lot of stuff going on. And getting back to this unknown texter, if you text me your name, I'd appreciate it. But she or he is right, because it's only 9.4 billion in recessions out of I think like 600 million or 600 billion, excuse me. Let's just call it 10 billion out of 600 billion. So whatever the percentage, it's not big, but it's a start. And we'll have more of these. and we need to continue to push towards that. And we're just getting started here at the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. Yes, we are back on the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. It's sunny right now in Florida, but I can see the storm clouds out as I overlook west into Mississippi. Definitely starting to build up over there. Hopefully everybody's got their weather radios locked in, got your plans, everything's good to go. Shouldn't be that big of a deal here, but you never know. Don't be scared, be weather aware. That's what Ryan Hall says. That's what I do. Look, we've got to talk about the destruction of late night comedy in the United States of America. We know that gone are the days of David Letterman and Johnny Carson. We're never going to have that back. There are many more alternatives out there now, as the mainstream media would have you believe. And the truth of the matter is, it is. There are many other opportunities for you to go out there and get a recap in a comedic way about the day's events without having to go to these government psyop operatives like Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert. But something amazing has happened. It's the free market. Actually, it's CBS selling and CBS clearing house. They're clearing house, and Mr. Stephen Colbert is on his way out. Now, I looked for some sound that just had his "I'm leaving the network next year," and I couldn't find it. I only could find this one that was slightly modified. So I will use that piece of sound for this segment. It's not normally something I would do, but it is kind of fitting. And then I'll share it on X so that everybody can see it. Here we go.
Next year will be our last season. The network will be ending The Late Show in May. And yeah, I share your feelings. It's not just the end of our show, but it's the end of The Late Show on CBS. I'm not being replaced. This is all just going away.
And that was his plan from all along, was to destroy late night TV. I would say that ABC is in cahoots with CBS. They had to kill it. They had to kill it. And that's what this leftist movement is doing across America, ladies and gentlemen. They are taking away Americana culture, things that we once hold dear and sacred, and they're just destroying it and then throwing it away when they don't need it anymore. You can say that about Budweiser. You can say that about Levi's. You can say that about all sorts of American companies. But this is the guy who pushed the vax on everybody. If you remember, there's that, and I'm not going to play that craziness, but he got out there and was dancing around with a bunch of syringes, telling everybody to get the shot. This is the same kid. You can go and look it up on X, where he sacrificed a live baby, or at least presented a live baby to a demon or a devil on his show, and then said, "I think the baby's going to be okay." The destruction of American culture through late night TV comics, quote unquote comics, is actually so easy to see when you look back on it. But when you're looking at it at the time, you're like, this isn't bad. What's really interesting to me is Mr. Colbert's monologue from just the other day. And he was complaining that the Republicans were hiding the Epstein files. He was actually out there saying, we need to release the files. We need to release the files. It almost makes you think that Donald Trump knew what the heck he was doing. It almost made you think that he had to get the Democrats out there saying that we need to release the Epstein files before he could actually do it. Could it be possible that Donald J. Trump is actually playing that 5D chess that many people, when this kicked off, he's actually doing? I said this had to be greater than 5D chess. This had to be interdimensional, warping the time-space continuum. Yep. It clearly appears that way if things continue to go down this road. I'm, for one, am grateful that CBS is being sold and that the news department is being completely gutted, because it's not news. It's propaganda that Pravda and the former Soviet Union would be proud of. it needs to go away. I think we need to go more towards independent journalism, whether that be those independent journalists who are on the right, those who are consider themselves in the middle, and those on the left. And it's up to you, the citizen, to be active in your civics, paying attention, going to places like Mississippi Today that are on the left, and reading what they're saying. Because whether you want to admit it or not, Mississippi Today has done a better job on reporting some of these issues that the right just wouldn't really want to touch, specifically the Rankin County Goon Squad. Of course, the right will touch it when they absolutely have to, but you know, to their credit, Mississippi Today has not let go of that. They're like a bulldog on a bone, and I'm here for it. And when I find good news stories that are important, that I think are important to all of us, I'm going to talk about it. Speaking of which, Magnolia Tribune, Russ Letourneau's office or outfit, and this is Kimberly Kindy and Amanda Seitz. I think they pulled this from the Associated Press, but I'm giving credit to Russ because I don't go to the Associated Press / Associated Propaganda. Trump administration hands over nation's Medicaid enrollee data, including addresses, to ICE. You know, that big, beautiful bill, all those ICE agents are rolling up. All those ICE agents who are on Medicaid, they're going to be able to go there and validate their citizenship. And if they're valid citizens, hey, they're going to stay on it. But if not, you're coming off the roll. And not only are they getting exported and deported out of our country, but we're going to start saving money on Medicaid, everybody. That is going to be a dividend that the Congressional Budget Office couldn't possibly account for. That's the kind of winning that Donald Trump's talking about. I'm quite certain that a majority of this audience can see that. But with our public school education system across the United States, I'm not sure a lot of people can. And that's why we ought to go back to Proverbs 15:1, gentle answers, turning away wrath, harsh words inciting anger. It's why you've got to do so gently. And I realize that there are people who are bulls in a china shop, and we need those people too. But that's just not my style. That's not the way I roll. I would much rather sit down and have a conversation with somebody who completely disagrees with me, as long as they don't get emotional, can control themselves. I think it's great. I hope I change their point of view, or maybe they can change my point of view. But honestly, in that conversation, that's not what I'm going for. I'm going for all of those of you in the middle who are listening to this show, and I know you do, and I'm grateful for you. We are having so much winning. I do have the Trump winning sound, but I think I'm going to hold off on it. It's just not quite enough yet. And just to get back to Stephen Colbert, the quartering on X has got this great picture of Stephen Colbert giving the Sig Heil. Remember when they tried to get Elon for that? And I mean, that's the beautiful thing about conservatism, and quite frankly, leftism, and just people who are keeping it 100, who are keeping it real. If you're going to try to call out saying Elon did that, well, you should see what, you know what, I'm just going to retweet that there because that needs to be seen. The left will sit there and make a big deal out of someone holding their heart and then putting their hand out and saying that's a Sig Heil. And then they got this, and they use a still grab, right? They use a still grab, so you don't get to see the whole thing. Well, here's another still grab of Stephen Colbert. Good on you. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9. We will be right back with our Captain Planet update. Don't miss it. And we are back on the Andrew Gosser Show, 103.9 WYAB. We're moving and grooving. And this story, or this came up in my timeline, and I'm like, I've been saying this for like the last 20 years. So that'd be like 2005. And I'm like, Captain Planet, man, that was a bad deal. And this clip came up. And shout out to Roman Helmet Guy, just at Roman Helmet Guy on X, worthy of a follow for digging this blast from the past up in 1991. If you do not think that your kids are being programmed through their devices, their iPads, their smartphones, their TV shows, you are kidding yourself, because they've had this on lockdown since 1960s, actually, with Schoolhouse Rock. They used to do meaningful stuff, but then the shift happened. Listen to this. This is 1991.
Remember that the Earth's resources are limited.
You do not need to have a big family.
Because all the world's people are your brothers and sisters.
The power is yours.
Imagine hearing that day after day. And never mind that some of the character choices is craziness. And am I saying that we don't need to be environmentally conscious? I am saying we need to be environmentally conscious. But when you're scaring the crap out of generations for their 30 years now, you wonder why these late 30-somethings, early 40-somethings are scared to death. You wonder why you've got these crazies who are 18 and 19 years old over in Europe gluing themselves into museums and throwing tomato soup onto priceless paintings in the Louvre. It's because they're programmed for it. And this is just another example. And people are like, Andy, you're out there, you're crazy. I'm not. I'm trying to give you just examples of how this is happening. And it's going to continue to happen. But you as a parent can see what your kids are watching, and when they get subjected to something like this, you say, you want to know what? That's not necessarily true. And in case you haven't noticed, the population reproduction rate in the Western society is absolutely plummeting. It's really bad. Meanwhile, in the Middle East and in Africa, it's going through the roof. Our society, our way of life, the things that we believe is absolutely cratering. We need to encourage healthy, monogamous relationships with lots of babies. Lots of babies are great. I've got one grandkid. I hope I get to see 15. I've got a neighbor who's got something like 26 grandkids, 15 great grandkids, 4 great grandkids, and 1 great grandkid. My God, what a blessing that man and that woman have. I know, I see them. It's absolutely incredible. Life is so beautiful. It's so precious. And to sit there and be programmed out of it systematically, not good. Not good. What is good and what is going to be great is the next hour. Because in the next hour, we are going to have Joe Pye Thomas on the program. J6 political prisoner of war, held by our then rogue DOJ. DOJ still needs a lot of work. We can all agree with that. FBI still needs a lot of work. We can all agree with that. But we're going to have a great hour talking to Joe and hearing about his points of view, his thoughts. I think it's going to be great. And I am so grateful to all of you. So right now, go get your Diet Cokes. Get ready to go for the next hour. Please share the stream. Give me a like on Facebook. Give me a like on Twitter. Give me a like on YouTube and Rumble. And we'll see you all in the next hour. You are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9. We will be right back. Lee, can you hear me okay?
attitudes in my political life and academia, my faith and everything. And so in that strive and that journey of trying to find truth, I became politically involved, especially online. And I saw that the president was having a rally to show support in D.C. So I wanted to go down there to show him support. But I'm going to go provide help where I can.
All right. Well, that is interesting that you could immediately tell it was CS gas. You know, if you weren't in the military, most people aren't uh, subjected to CS gas. So they took off their own way and just kind of walked through what you did from there.
Sure. Yeah, they went back to the buses and were able to safely get back home. I went towards the Capitol. I actually arrived on Capitol grounds roughly around 1:30, 1:45 in the afternoon. Made my way up to the Upper West Terrace. Things looked a little off. There were like people with bullhorns and people encouraging the crowd to move forward in different places. But, you know, you just sort of follow the crowd in that moment. It was pretty packed, several hundreds of thousands of people there. There were no barriers, no trespassing signs. A lot of the news, mainstream media will tell you like, oh, it was clearly marked and it was blocked off and all these things. And we had proven in court in a couple different ways that there was no signs permitting or prohibiting us from being there. All the signs that were there previously had been removed, and so had all the barriers. So we had no way of knowing. But once I got there, I did start seeing the police forming lines outside the Capitol and becoming forceful with the protesters that were just standing there singing, praying, completely peaceful. And then, for the lack of a better term, the police attacked the peaceful protesters with munitions, tear gas, pepper spray, and then they started beating unarmed Americans with metal batons and riot shields and everything else. And of course, emotions become heightened. People tend to react. Some people got caught up in their emotions, and the rest is history. But it was nowhere near as violent as the news portrays. Any bits of clashing or force was very limited in isolated pockets. That's probably why the news plays the same 10 video clips over and over and over again to try to encompass what they say happened for the entire day, because it really wasn't the melee that people make it out to be.
Yep.
Unfortunately, though, some of that I did see police brutality. One of the first things that I had seen was they tear gassed an elderly woman and a young girl who I assume is her granddaughter, maybe 10, 11 years old. And that made me change my rhetoric and started kind of talking to the police, like, why are you doing this? They're unarmed Americans, et cetera, et cetera. And so I made a point to de-escalate the situation, try to keep a space between the protesters and the police because they would periodically clash. At one point, I did see an officer attack an elderly man that was laying on the ground. He had fallen on his own. And the officer ran up to him and started beating him over the head with a metal baton. And that's considered lethal force. The man was not a threat. So I ran up and kind of pushed the officer off the gentleman and then used my body as a shield to keep him from getting hurt, helped him get off the ground. And then I left the situation. But because I realized that people were being attacked and hurt, I went back to try to talk some sense into the police, to offer any aid that I could. But again, I was never violent. I never attacked the police, no matter what the news said or anything. And we again had proven this in court when I went to trial. But that was sort of the story of the whole day. Peaceful protesters being agitated, provoked by others in the crowd, as well as by the police and attacked by the police. There were definitely people in the crowd trying to encourage violence.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit, Joe? What did you specifically see from people in the crowd? Because we've had people on the show before who specifically brought up certain points about crowd agitation, and I want to see if your answers match up with what we've had on our show before.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was one specific incident that I have copious amounts of video regarding, but there was a couple gentlemen that they sort of stuck out from the crowd. You know, you could look at a crowd and say something in this picture doesn't belong, and it was those two. But they were trying to encourage the protesters to pick up some pipes next to the inaugural stage that were on the ground and to use them against the police, as they said, for their own defense, which made no sense. Of course, you don't want to escalate that situation at all. And so myself and a couple other protesters in the area took those pipes away from people, turned them over to the police, pointed out the gentlemen that were trying to provoke violence. And of course, as the story goes, they were never arrested, but handfuls of peaceful protesters were. But they were attempting to try to get people to push past the police line, use those pipes as weapons. I'm just constantly trying to goad the crowd into doing things that they should not do. And, like I had said in court, there was no reason to go into the Capitol because the Capitol is not a weird game of capture the flag. Like, we were there to have our voices heard and to just be a show of numbers for our representatives to see that the voice of the people wanted to be heard.
Yep. And what you're talking about, Joe, is something that I have heard from other people who were there on January 6th and ended up going through the legal process. And, just a long story of people in the crowd trying to get people fired up and make a tense situation even more tense. Look, we're going to take a break a little bit early because this is a good spot to take a break. But when we get back, I want to talk about you leaving January 6th and then that whole process of what happened going forward. Does that sound like a plan?
I'm down with it, buddy.
All right. You're listening
great.
to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We're streaming on Rumble. We're streaming on X, YouTube, and that Facebook platform, WYAB.com. Let people know we've got Joe Thomas on, and we want to make sure that his voice gets heard. We'll be right back. It's absolutely incredible how I can never have a microphone glitch on stream ever. And as soon as we get a J6er on to talk about J6, the microphone glitches out on the social media networks. We'll still have an upload. I'll make sure that I get that up tonight, but I apologize for that. We'll get it fixed for the next time. Although I'm not sure how we're going to fix it because I don't know exactly what happened. And we are back on the Andrew Gosser Show, 103.9 WYAB. This segment is brought to you by who? iGear Optical and our man Bruce Bennett over there in Pearl, 2630 Highway 80 in Pearl to be exact. Look, we all need glasses as we're getting older. Why go somewhere online? Why go to some big box company when you can go to your local guy, Brother Bruce, who's going to take care of you, treat you well, make sure that your glasses fit perfectly. And not only that, you're given the best deal. Bruce doesn't take insurance. He gives you the best deal that you can possibly get out there. It's a great way to get glasses. I can't recommend Bruce enough. I've watched him treat his customers, and you hear me talking about him, but it's only because I believe in him so much. He's available Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturdays. That's iGearOptical.com. Brother Joe, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, let's continue. So J6 winds down and you're heading back. What happens then in your life?
Yeah, sure. So I just went home. I didn't think I did anything wrong. I published all the video that I had taken on social media and was showing folks that the mainstream narrative wasn't exactly true. And I think it was February of 2021. I got a phone call from my wife one day when I was at work saying she found my picture on the FBI's website asking to help identify me. And of course, I tend to be a smart aleck, so I made a joke. I guess I thought it would feel good to be wanted, which she didn't like too much. But I contacted friends that have legal expertise, and I kind of asked them what to do because my original intention was just turn myself in. They want to question me, they want to talk to me. I didn't do anything, so what do I got to worry about? But I was advised to not do that, to let them just come find me organically. Just understand that they're going to come and get me one day, so make preparations ahead of time. But don't do anything crazy. Don't try to run. Don't try to do anything, which I had no intention of it anyway. And so that's what I did. And then in May of 2021, while I was at work, I was working away from home. I was actually in the state of Alabama, and originally I'm from West Virginia. But I was down there, and that's when the counterterrorism SWAT team jumped out of the back of a van and full automatic rifles, tactical gear, screaming FBI, get down on the ground. And all that. And of course, I just peaceably surrendered. I actually thanked all of the FBI agents for their service because I realized if they're Americans, they want to go home safe to their family. And once I was in cuffs and they did what they had to do, they treated me with dignity and respect. But from there, I was taken to the U.S. Marshal's office, put in front of a federal judge, and somehow by the grace of God, I was awarded bond and able to go back home to my family and, fight my case out here instead of being locked up like many others who had lesser charges, who, didn't have any criminal history, whatever. And that surprised me. So throughout that whole process, again, being a man of faith, I asked God, why did you give me freedom? What do you want me to do with it? Because there's other men that I consider much better than me, that their bonds are denied and they're locked up, and all the horror stories that people hear about the J6ers in the jail. And it was in June that I had heard the guys in the DC jail singing the national anthem. And I found that they were doing it in protest of their conditions, as well as the way to stand in solidarity with each other. And that moved me. And I feel that God spoke to my heart at that point and said, this is the reason why. And so out on my porch, I started singing the national anthem with them every night. My neighbor one night heard me and asked me what I was doing. She assumed I was like practicing for a ball game or something. But I told her, and silently, she just kind of left. A couple of days later, once again out there singing the anthem as I was doing every night, and I heard her and her 12-year-old son singing with me. And that moved my heart. And so I started what's called the Sing for Freedom campaign. It's Sing, the number 4, freedom. And what it was is asking America to sing along with the men that were locked up, to show them solidarity, to let them know that a nation stands behind them. America sings with them, to bring awareness to what was going on with them, and also to give some hope to their families that are suffering through this as well, to let them know that they were not alone in this fight. And the reception was amazing. God made just a small act of kindness and compassion blow up into something that became a worldwide campaign. We would receive videos from all over the country of people singing the anthem and posting it all over the internet for our J6ers, as well as other countries like England and Brazil and Japan. Eventually, we even had an influence in the country of Iran for women that were standing up against police brutality for women's rights. And that was actually used against me in court. Apparently, that makes me super dangerous. But nonetheless, I became a very public advocate, fighting for justice for the J6ers, try to keep the truth out in the front and to get people involved, eyes, hearts, and minds into the cause of justice and, truth and transparency, because innocent Americans were being persecuted simply because of their political beliefs. The court cases, everything that was going on with the J6ers, all of it was slanted against us. The institutions that we were raised to trust were weaponized against us. And so nobody got a fair trial. Everything that we did in court, and I'll speak specifically to my case, every motion I filed was denied by the court. Every motion the government filed was granted to them. I was not allowed to present a majority of the evidence I wanted to present in my own defense, but they could run ramshot over me and everything and anything that they wanted to do. At one point, the judge even threatened my attorneys with contempt charges, jail time, sanctions, etc., if they even mentioned the First Amendment as part of my defense.
Hey, Joe, really quick, I need to ask you, where was your trial and who was your judge?
Yeah, so my trial was in the district courts of D.C., and my judge was Honorable Dabney Friedrich.
Yep, and for those who've been listening to the program a while, we know those names, and we had J6er Lieutenant Colonel Brock on the program, and he ended up calling the DC jail the DC Gulag, and I know we're getting there, but I want to let you tell the story, but I also want to make sure everybody's following along. Look, this trial's going on in DC. We know what's happened in DC. We see what's happening now. Brother Joe, please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. So my trial was only supposed to last a week. That was the quote unquote time limit that the judge had given. But my trial actually lasted 3 weeks. I took it all the way to jury. I know some folks, they got plea deals or went to bench trial, whatnot. But I was facing 12 federal charges, looking at 30 years in prison, realistically. And again, I never went into the building. I was not violent. Several of the charges I was charged with were considered assault. But as my attorney said, unless I assaulted their nightsticks with my face, he didn't understand how they could charge me. Because, again, I didn't attack anybody. They beat me. Now, with that being said, after 3 weeks of trial, my rights being violated left and right. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but they would do dirty things like change timestamps on evidence, manipulate or not present evidence, tamper with witnesses. We caught 2 different police officers lying on the stand, committing perjury with video proof, red-handed right there, and the judge did nothing about it. I was forced to testify, and again, I was denied my First Amendment right as part of my defense. And simply because I pled not guilty, they accused me of perjury, saying that because I claimed to be not guilty, then obviously I'm lying. But after this is all said and done, my 3-week trial, I beat a majority of my charges, and I was sentenced to 5 years, well, 58 months, which is 2 months shy of 5 years. And then I was ordered to report to prison in FCI Memphis, which is the federal prison there in Tennessee.
Okay. So you did not have to go, you didn't have to go to the DC gulag then?
No, I never went to the DC jail, although I did speak with a lot of the guys that were in there, especially when I was out before my trial, advocating for their release, advocating for true and fair justice. Like, just a fair trial is really what anybody wanted. If J6ers would have got that, then we would have been able to show the truth and point out that most of people's actions were not what they were being construed as, such as me being charged with assault, but yet I never assaulted anyone, which in my trial, I was actually found not guilty of any violence. And the assault aspect of that statute was supposed to disappear because the wording is assaulting, resisting, or impeding. With that being said, at the trial, they said, yeah, that's not assault, so he's going to be guilty of impeding. But when it came time for my sentencing, they flipped the script, added aggravated assault sentencing enhancements to all of those. And I was also found not guilty of what is known as the 1512 obstruction of an official proceeding charge, which is a 20-year felony. I'm actually the only J6 defendant that went to jury trial that was found not guilty of that.
Wow.
But the crazy part about all of it is, even though I was found not guilty, the prosecution argued that because I knew the Constitution and the Electoral Count Act so well, that I tricked the jury into finding me not guilty. And the judge agreed, and so they gave me the sentencing enhancements for the 20-year felony anyway. That way they could try to maximize the time that I was going to be sent away to prison. And despite being sentenced to almost 5 years, I walked out of that courtroom with my chest held high, feeling that I won, because I was found not guilty of the government's narrative. I was found not guilty of violence. I was found not guilty of trying to interrupt the election count. And that's pretty much the government's narrative for every J6er that they go after.
Wow. You want to know what? This is a good place to take a break. We're going to give you one more segment because we want to hear about what you did once you did go to prison. I think that's honestly the most important part of this story. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We'll be right back with Joe. We'll be right back. Hey, brother.
Yeah.
And welcome back to the Andrew Gosser Show. You are listening to Joe Thomas, Joe Pie Thomas. We didn't even get into your call sign yet. But before we get into all of that, I got to tell you, this segment is brought to us by Elite Roofing and Gutters, previously complete exteriors. Brother Joe Boyd out there doing a great job with Sister Tanya and Brother Nick. If you're looking for a roof, if it's time that you've been putting it off and you know you need a new roof, you need to go see Elite Roofing and Gutters. They have the complete solution. They're in-house. They're incredibly professional. Go ahead and visit them online at eliteroofer.com, or you can give them a call at 601-326-2755, or you can even email them. It's just info@eliteroofer.com. All right, Joe, we were talking. You were getting ready to go off to prison. Just take it away and run.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to touch on my nickname Pi, right? It's like it's the number 3.14 plus, whatever. So real quick on that, I'm a nerd and I'm proudly own that title. And whenever I created an online account, I named it Pi Anon, which I was an anonymous account. I didn't want my personal information, not my face, et cetera. Just kind of push the truth out there, do research, and not have my political opinion get tied to my family. And so I created Pi Anon. And the reason that all started is because I was watching a TV show with my son, and he asked me one day about it because it was mentioned in the show. I explained to him what pi was, and for fun, over the summer, we tried to memorize as much of pi as we could, made a little game out of it. In the process, I ended up memorizing the first 200 digits. It just kind of became a nerd flex, a weird little party trick, and it stuck. Friends started calling me Pi, and then I created the online thing, and then it all kind of just grew from there. But nonetheless, headed to prison. I went to Memphis, Tennessee, and, self-surrendered, said goodbye to my family, my wife, my 4 kids, understanding that God had us on a mission, right? God put us on this road for a reason. We couldn't figure it out. It was horrendous. It was terrifying, but we stood by our guns and said, though he slay me, I will trust in the name of the Lord. I was an independent minister before all of this was going on, and that doesn't change. I will share the word, share the love of Christ every possible chance that I can. And so walking into those gates, I went in knowing that he had something in store. No idea what it was, but I'll follow through. And once I was inside, I got involved in the religious services, the chapel on the prison compound, and just sort of lived my faith, right? I would be kind and generous to folks, no matter who they were, what gang they were affiliated with, or any of the charges. None of that mattered. We're all children of God. We're all sinners. We all stand guilty before our judge. And so I was just kind and generous, but that opened up the door for me to share the gospel, to give people biblical advice, or to, have them come and pray with me and things of that nature. Over time, I realized the chapel had only maybe 20, 30 people at most at any given time. And the way the prison works is it separates itself naturally by race, gang affiliation. People flock to where they can relate to people and feel safe, because prison is a dangerous place. I was in there with some of the worst of the worst. I mean, you get cartels, drugs, gangs, child traffickers. I mean, you name it. Definitely not a place to make friends, for sure. But throughout this, just living my faith, like Thomas Aquinas says, share the gospel everywhere you go. When necessary, use words. People started to see me as a quote-unquote man of God. I would try to invite people to the chapel to come up to church and hear the word, to give a chance to worship and praise. And I found out that many of the gangs do not allow their guys to go to the church because there's rivals that go up there, or people they don't want to associate with. And so it become a bit of a roadblock. So I felt moved by God to go down and start talking to some of the gang leaders, cartel leaders, try to negotiate passage for their guys to be able to go to church. Simple enough. I mean, it didn't come without threats, potential violence, and things of that nature, but God was there with me. He protected me through the whole thing. And I stood by my faith, and I saw the hand of God move mightily across that prison compound. People were changing. They were giving their lives to Christ. They were being allowed to come up to the church. Even some of the leaders themselves would come up and hear the word and dedicate their life to Christ. And it changed the entire atmosphere of the prison. We talked the prison into allowing water baptisms once a month, doing communion once a month, started a Bible study on Sunday afternoons, another one on Wednesday evenings, and even prayer circles in all of the different housing units where the cells are located. We'd have a prayer circle every single night. And guys would get together and hold hands and pray and lay their petitions before God. And over time, that caught attention from the warden, because when they see a Vayuko and a Sereno and a Aryan Brotherhood and a Blood or a Crip go all walking into a cell together, they don't think Bible study, right? They think they're doing something nefarious. And so my cell was flipped numerous times, a couple times a week for months on end. They put a bunch of roadblocks and all these things. And then eventually they realized what was actually happening, because the chapel would be standing room only for weeks and weeks and weeks. For like the last 5 or 6 months that I was in, we would have 120, 130 people all the time. People dedicating their life to Christ nonstop. It was truly a beautiful thing. The story of redemption that Christ provides was in full effect, and it drew attention. The warden eventually came into the chapel one day, and I believe he said he was a warden for 25 years at 6 different facilities, and he'd never seen anything like it. Last I heard, they were actually getting approval for a documentary team to come in and sort of document how the Spirit moved in the compound. But I think the most beautiful part of it all, not only people surrendering their salvation to Christ, was that all of the racial boundaries, the quote unquote prison politics, disappeared. And not just in the chapel, out in the rec yard, the housing units. You would have Bloods and Crips and Aryan Brotherhood and white supremacists and Mexican cartel gangs all together, holding hands, worshiping, singing praise, doing Bible study. There was no more division, no more separation. And they would go out and actually encourage other people across the prison, hey, come to church with us, come join us, come do this, come do that, where normally they wouldn't even affiliate with one another. And I really didn't do anything other than just show my faith. And then the Spirit of God moved and worked and pricked people's hearts and brought it to where the Spirit flourished there, despite the enemy's attacks, or despite the fact that these men were seen as the worst of society and not redeemable. But Christ can redeem anybody. And right. Truly a story that about this that I'd really love to highlight is there's a gentleman that was doing 25 years. He was in trouble for methamphetamines, but his family completely wrote him off. He dedicated his life to Christ, was baptized, really got into the Word, and he found a way to rebuild those bridges and started calling his family and spoke to his daughter for the first time after 15 years.
Wow.
And started doing Bible study and praying over the phone with her. I mean, to me, that's beautiful. There was another instance of a Mexican gang member that did not appreciate the fact that I was trying to get one of his guys to come to church. And he and another man cornered me one day and pulled a knife on me and told me to stop. I refused, but I did it in a way that made him laugh. You know what I mean? I stood my ground and said, if you're going to kill me, then one of y'all is going to come meet him with me, because I'm not going to go see God alone. And he thought that was funny. It's prison. I don't have any other way to explain it. But that gentleman that went from wanting to use force against somebody that was trying to push faith ended up being someone that dedicated his life, got baptized, and then would come and knock on my cell door and say, hey, man, the chapel's open. Are you going to come with us? And that truly is a story of redemption, just like Paul in the Bible. He went from persecuting and killing Christians to then being one of the most prominent figures in the New Testament. And that was the sermon that he had heard from the chaplain at the church, at the chapel, that moved him to tears to give his life to Christ. The fact that Paul could be redeemed gave him hope. And it's those stories that people don't get to hear too often. You know, God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He uses the low. He uses the weak. He uses the underdog to do mighty things. And I was there, I believe, to witness what God was doing, so that now that I'm out, I can testify to his faithfulness. I can show others and testify to everything that he had done in there for the men that everyone else wrote off.
And Joe, I know there are people asking, hey, what about this? What about this? But your story and your testimony is so strong. It's truly a Proverbs 15:1. Gentle answers, turning away wrath, and harsh words, inciting anger, bringing everybody into the fold. And Joe, it's beautiful. And it's just a shame to me, and I'm sure everybody listening, that your story isn't out there for more and more people to hear. And I'm sure you've got more examples. We've got about 3.5 minutes left. Is there anything else you want to add to that before we have to go to our final break of the hour?
Yeah. So I just want folks to remember that it's small things that make the biggest difference, right? And when you're obedient to God, especially if it's something that you really don't want to do, but you feel led by the Spirit and so you obey, He has something bigger in store for you. And we want to save our country because freedom is the greatest gift that our Lord gave us next to our salvation. And that freedom is something that we need to steward and protect for the next generation as well. But not everybody's a senator. Not everybody's a politician or a mayor or anything of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's a millionaire. But if you can do something small in your local community, have your voice heard. If you're great at making quilts, then make a quilt, donate it to an organization that's out there doing things so that maybe they can raffle it off, get some money for a van to take people to an event or to get people to the election polls or whatever it may be. It was a simple act of me standing with the J6ers and singing the anthem that made a national impact. We actually interrupted Trump on stage at a couple of his rallies and had whole stadiums of 20,000 plus people singing the anthem together to highlight the injustice. And this is a point in our American history where we can see the problems that were highlighted by January 6th. And these are things that have been going on for a very long time. But now we have a chance to fix it. Back in the day of the civil rights movement, 4 men stopped at a lunch diner to get a sandwich and they were denied, so they refused to leave until they got a sandwich. That created a national movement from just a small act. And now we look back and realize that helped to end segregation in our country. I'm not equating January 6th to the civil rights movement, but it's the small acts that stand for American values, that stand for the Christian principles, that change the world. And so a small act has a national impact. Listen to that small, still voice within your heart, and whatever God is leading you to do, say, Father, I'm here, send me. He sent me to prison, and I'm thankful for every bit of it. It was rough. My family has suffered. I came home to absolute devastation, financially, emotionally, the traumas, missing deaths, missing graduations and birthdays, missing the births of grandchildren, and also the death of a grandchild.
Mm.
But my family, we grew stronger together. We got to put our faith into action. For years, I preached about thanking God for tough times, and now He gave me the chance to do it. And I'm humbled that He chose me to walk down that road with Him. Because just as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the furnace, they threw me into the fire. America was told to bow to tyranny, and a handful of us stood up and said, no, we only bow to God. But Christ went into that fire with us, and now we're out, and now we have a chance to fix it so that this should never happen to another person. I have a website. If anybody's interested, wants more information about my story, wants to get involved, whatever, you can visit the website. It's sing4freedom.us. It's simple. Something as easy as writing a letter to your congressman can be the difference between getting a committee set up to find out the truth, getting a committee that will set up to remove the last J6er that's still in prison, even though he has a pardon. The judge refuses to acknowledge it. My judge, Dabney Friedrich, ordered Dan Wilson, a fellow J6er. After he was released because of the pardon, she changed her mind and ordered him to go back to prison. And so we still sing the anthem every night to stand in solidarity with him. We are fighting within the courts through First Network and Roots Justice to try to not only get him free, but to hold those accountable that weaponize the government against the American people, to make sure that this does not happen to my kids, your grandkids, for any generation down the line, because this can never happen again.
Brother Joe Thomas, we are so grateful and thankful that you were able to come on. We want to have you on again in a couple months so we can get an update. Maybe we can get you to recite the pie up to maybe like the 50th number. That would be really cool. Joe, you are a man of God. It's clear for everybody who got to hear you today over the airwaves and over the internet that you are walking in faith. And that's the kind of example we need to have, not just for those of us who are in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, but to our kids so that they can see this is the right way to go. And I've got to go to the break, but when I get back, I want to read some of your all comments coming in because they are truly moving. Joe, God bless you. Thank you so much for coming on.
God bless you and God bless America, sir. Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye. And we are back on the Andrew Gosser Show, 103.9 WYAB, streaming on Rumble, streaming on X, streaming on YouTube. And for today, fam, we're streaming on Facebook, and we're saying it because we had Joe Thomas on. What an incredible story, wasn't it? I mean, just think the mainstream media you would have never heard any of this. But we've got a platform here at WYAB and the Andrew Gosser Show, and I promise everybody out there that I will continue to allow these men and women who went through this craziness to have their voices heard, because we have to. And the comments are incredible. Brother Junk says, shameful what this government did to this man. I agree, brother. And you keep it live at this WYAB Southern Command. Lee Boyd, thank you for having him on. Brother Lee, it's grateful to have you out there. Miss Lynette said that this was an awesome show. Thanks for having Joe. He has beautiful stories. And the last one I want to read here before we wrap this up and put a bow on top is, enjoying the interview with Pi. That could have been me. Had Trump not won, many more of us would have probably been rounded up. Fight, fight, fight. And that's what we do here at WYAB. That's what we do here on the Andrew Gosser Show and the other shows too. We're not afraid to say the hard things that need to be said, holding our government accountable. Everybody thinks that, if they were out there, they would do the exact same thing. But why aren't the other media outlets doing it? If they're not, because they're taking state money, and WYAB does not. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us special. There's so much more going on that I wanted to talk to. All sorts of breaking news during this past hour while we were on with Brother Pry. The school books in the DOD prisons, they're coming out. All that pornography, it's coming out. We're having victory after victory. And we just need to continue to celebrate people like Joe and the victories that we have. It's a long, hard fight, and we all have our own races to run. And what's your race might not be Brother Joe's race. Hey, real quick, Brother Joe, I didn't forget, you do have a Give, Send, Go. It's just J6Joe at Give, Send, Go. If you feel compelled to give to him, he did lose his job and was in prison for a while, and any help that we could give that guy, that would be pretty cool. J6Joe at Give, Send, Go. And he's got a website, singforfreedom.com. You were listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. We'll see you in 22 hours. Joe, you there? I'll have to call him back.